This is all that's left. This is the final boss of the tutorial, and this boss does not play around in mechanics. There is basically nothing from vanilla. The boss can stun your highest damaging tower in stone, and then the tower can't do anything. However, you can select that tower, and then that would free it, making it immune. The cost is, it costs 50 lives each time you do this. So I'm going to place a bunch of towers. Sniper, ninja, free. Now it deducts 50 lives. Just let it play around. And now it's trying to target the wizard. Just freed that one, cost 8 lives. So if you want to keep, you could keep freeing them, but it's going to keep draining lives. So you want to have as few damaging towers as possible for dealing with this boss. Or if you have like all the lives to spend, you can just keep going. So I'm going to go and show exactly how this mechanic works, and there's a lot of components. It's also worth noting that this uses a custom display for the effect itself. I already covered how boss registration works, so this is just for guild boss. So below we have a time trigger model. I already explained that for the first boss, and this has an action ID of Encase, which that gets added to the boss here. However, it also makes a copy of the stun, which this was from earlier, also from the first boss. So I duplicated it, and then I took its mutator, because this boss does not stun towers in radius. It has to manually apply the mutation. Now, encasement here, this is a public variable. Basically, I can access it anywhere. So you can see at the top, I've already defined some important public variables I'm going to need later. So encasement is already defined at the top. So let me look back here. Encasement, I applied the ID to encasement. This will come important later. And see here, encasement has a tower stun display ID, which is a prefab reference. And here, I got the prefab reference encasement. So I'm going to go to its definition. Now here, I extracted from the game export data. This is the prop of a walk. So I can just use this reference. And then the walk effect is going to be that. So, under time trigger, if it has an encase ID, it'll do all these actions. Now the first is to get every tower on screen, and then it'll sort them by descending, so the highest damaging tower is going to be first in the list. And then, this loop, it'll go through each tower that's in that list. If immune does not have that ID, and the tower is not currently encased, then it'll get affected by encasement. Now how does a tower get into immune? You have to look at the selection. Now, as I've said before in the boss descriptions, if the tower is selected while it's being encased, which I can check using is mutated by, it'll check if it has this ID within the mutators. Every mutator in the game has an ID, and this is useful for if statements to check if a tower has one. Then you can make a custom effect. So in this case, if it gets selected, then it'll clear that mutator by using its ID encasement, and then it'll deduct the 50 lives. However, the list immune will have that ID added. I also added a function, so as soon as the boss spawns, the Gilded boss, it'll clear everything immune. So in case the bosses respawn, then that won't be a problem. You can see here I added a new mono behavior, final boss mono behavior, but this isn't going to be used quite yet. One thing I forgot to mention is this is a patch. The patch is on selection change. This is a method that runs when an object is selected. But there are different types of things that can be selected in the game, such as props or like menu options. So you want to make sure it's a tower that's being selected, which is why I put selected.isType tower to simulation. And at first, if it is a tower to simulation, then I'll cast it as a tower to simulation. Then I can get the tower and then the mutation function. To start things off, I added a health % trigger model for the Gilded armor, And this has a trigger value of a 0.999, so the boss is immediately going to use it, since this is for testing purposes. And it has an action ID of Gilded Armor. And once that's added, so all I have to do is patch the health percent trigger. And what you can see here, it adds 10,000 to the Gilded Armor value of the Gilded mono behavior. Now I showed earlier the public values included the Gilded mono behavior, and that starts in the boss initiation. So I can scroll down in the boss init. So we have that ready here. Now within the boss registration, if the Gilded Armor value is above, then the fake health value is going to be set to Gilded Armor. And then also, because I know it's 10,000. And additionally, when the armor is applied, I added update armor, which should be set to true, which I know I showed earlier. It'll update the armor. So this, I don't want to like update this kind of stuff every single frame. So by just making it only when update armor is true, and then it'll do it. And after it gets updated, it can just set it back to false. So in the case a Gilded Armor needs to be updated and it's above 0, then it'll change it to uses health override on the registration. So this is going to use the fake health, which is basically the armor health. Now this function changes the display for the health bar. In this case, this is Dread bar, which uses the whole walkie health bar texture. I included it in Boss Manager, so you can just use this if you want. But you can also make your own health bars. That's also an option. Now here, this will change the boss's display by getting its Unity display node and then all the renderers, and it'll set the texture to gold. Now this, I'm not going to touch this yet. This is just going to reset the boss later, but I haven't coded that. Quick peek at what it looks like. Aim at the boss, hit it a few times, and the boss is now encased in gold. This is just a pretty crappy texture, but I can change that later. So the health bar is now the walkie texture like Dread Balloon, and it's 10,000 at 10,000. So we know that works. There's no functionality with the armor yet, so I'm going to be coding that in balloon.damage patch. I have an if statement, if it is the Gilded bad, and I know the mono behavior associated can only exist as long as the boss does. So if the armor is above 0, we know the Gilded armor is applied. So the total amount the boss should take is 0 since it's being redirected into the armor. Now, but before that, we need to check how much damage this is. So if total amount greater or equal to 1000, then the Gilded armor minus equals total amount. So pretty simple. I just need to do a conversion. Oh yeah, I have to take that from this. So now, only if it's above 1000 it'll do the reduction. Now let's say this drops below or equal to 0. If that's the case, then the armor should be removed. So another condition. I should reset the boss back to normal because I already coded it to do that in the final boss mod behavior. So if that's correct, this should work. So quick test one. And here I have boss. Now it has the armor. Now a MAD is not going to cut it because it doesn't do enough damage to fulfill that parameter. But I know a Moab Eliminated does. You shoot that, and you'll notice the armor actually took damage this time. So hit again, 1000 health, and now the armor is gone. So I guess we can look into the ultimate now. It was a bit of a glitched effect. Within the final boss's mono behavior, I have a list of entities which are the diamond effect. And this starts when the boss is below 60% health. It'll first check if the list is empty, and if it is, it'll create this list of every prefab reference, which these are all the diamond effects that are going to be shown. And for each one, it'll spawn an effect in game, which I explain how to spawn effects in part 2. But this time it adds those effects into a list, because it returns an entity, and diamond effect accepts entity objects. And then here, for each of those objects within the list, it'll do a bit of math to change its positioning. Using math.sin and math.cos, it changes the x and y coordinates over time. So it gets the effect that it goes towards and close to the boss. The way it works is this is like the offset 50, and then this changes over time as rotation adjusts. So it's up to like 10 above or 10 below 50, because math.sin will go will go down towards -1 and at most 1. And here, once those, and this takes the boss position, basically the default. So the diamond should rotate around this position. This is simply the offset from that. And then because this radian, this is basically the radian offset, I is going to be from 0, 1, 2, 3. So you're doing this for interloop. So that way each diamond is 1.57 radians in rotation around the boss. To start the ultimate off, I'm going to spawn the 4 diamonds. These are just balloons, but they're going to be invisible and have the gems positioned on top of them. So it looks like the boss is distributing them across the map. Here I added the diamond balloon, which for testing purposes only has 100 health, and it does not have a display since I want it to be invisible so the gems can be positioned above them. Now, unlike the main boss, its boss registration sets the main boss property to false. That way it does not occupy the upper panel, but it can still activate boss init, so it can be registered into the final boss mono behavior. The final boss also has a spawn balloons action model for spawning these invisible balloons. Now I'm going to scroll down to boss init. So here I added, if the balloon model is a diamond, then it's going to be registered into the Gilded mono behavior in the list diamonds. This is basically just stores all the diamonds for modification within the final boss mono behavior, which is a variable you can see here. I set in final boss mono behavior. So as the boss is going, if the diamonds.count is above 0, that means that a diamond must have spawned, and then it's going to enter this code. So first, the cutter charge. This is also a property I set. It starts off as 0. This is going to determine how powerful the charger is, and it's going to keep accumulating as long as there's diamonds on screen. So as soon as these diamonds spawn, it's going to set the count to 4, and the first one does not have a tower immunity. So this is going to just correct all of them. It's going to set the first one to primary, second to military, etc. And additionally, once cutter charge is above 0, it's going to be setting all of these variables. So it's going to use the extra info, so it's going to display the cutter charge under the boss health. Now, some other things I've changed. This is going to start immediately since the boss is going to use the diamond thing as soon as it spawns. So here, now this I added an additional if statement. So the diamonds will rotate around the boss if there's 0 cutter charge, so the boss is just not using that ability. But if it is using the ultimate, there are going to be diamonds on screen, thus the cutter charge is above 0, thus it's going to go into the else statement. And then for each diamond that is not popped, it's going to position it over one of these invisible balloons. It's also going to keep them invisible using dot scale. So if a balloon is popped, and then it's going to just simply set the position of the diamond effect to 500, so it's just off screen. It's going to see how that looks in game. I made the health percent trigger model activate the ultimate instead of the Gilded armor for testing purposes. So now I can see everything spawned. Now this can't damage the military diamond, but it can damage the magic one. However, the plan was that it's supposed to only be poppable in order from primary all the way down to support. So I'm going to need to change that. See here, the primary is all gone. This is all that's left. Also, the boss should be invulnerable during this effect, so I'm going to change that. Simple fix. I'm going to make it so the boss is vulnerable the moment the diamonds spawn. Then once that's all clear, I can change this to false later. So since this handles all the diamonds in itself, I'm going to do this is how this is going to work. Is since this goes through each balloon in order from primary, military, magic, dot to support, I'm going to make it so it's not destroyed. It'll set this to I'll explain what this is going to do in a sec. So when this loop goes to all diamonds, this vulnerable property is set to false. So once it gets the first diamond that can be vulnerable, it'll make that one vulnerable by setting is it vulnerable to false. But then this causes vulnerable property to be set to true. Therefore, it no longer fits this if statement. So then it goes over to all other diamonds as set invulnerable to true. Now, let's say all of them are popped. So once it goes through this entire if statement loop, the boss should no longer be invulnerable. So if So the only way this condition can be met is that all balloons would have to be destroyed. So for this property to remain as false. And it'll only activate if the cutter charge is above 0. That way it'll only activate during the ultimate. Okay, now for the test. This will destroy things pretty quickly. So now we have this should not is correct. This is magic. First should be primary. So that gets destroyed. Still, this can't be destroyed. Next is military. Oh, this one's immune. I have to put this. That is destroyed. This is next, and then that can be destroyed. And now the boss is vulnerable again. But it seems cutter charge is still increasing. I added an additional line to the ultimate cancellation, which clears the list of diamonds that were spawned. That way the cutter charge won't increase further. I also added this boss.get bloom behaviors, and I know that I'm going to be adding a second spawn balloons action. So this will get the second index and then perform that action. So if I scroll back to initialization process, you can see up here I've already created the cutter spawner, which is being added to the boss. Additionally, the cutter balloon was already created. Because now normally this code here, this will be used for mini lich, but in my case the amount of lives drained scales with the cutter charge, so I'm not going to be using that. So I'm going to go back to the model behavior. Now when the cutter spawns, because it's also a sub boss like the diamonds, it's going to go into this code. Additionally, it's going to gain some additional health depending on the cutter charge when it was initiated. So it'll use this code. The cutter charge multiplied by 10 and added to the balloon health. Additionally, Gilded mono behavior now has a dictionary, which is going to store the cutter charge and link it to the balloon that's being stored, which is the cutter. Additionally, it's going to just reset the cutter charge once that's all over. So you can see here in the mono behavior, I added a dictionary. So this is gonna link each cutter to a cutter charge, because the cutter charge determines how dangerous it is. So we see here I added the update. This is a key value pair loop. So this goes to every entry within the dictionary, which I've initiated here. So I'll get the balloon from the key, and it's gonna set its track speed to 50, and its scale to 1.5. And when it reaches the end of the track, it loops. Let's see this in action. Okay, this needs to be destroyed. Okay, now we see the cutters start moving. And it loops, just expected. But I haven't done the whole life drain system yet, and charge scaling, so I'm going to implement that now. Back in boss init, if you recall, I set in boss init, I set the key value pair to. In boss init, I stored the cutter charge as a dictionary value for the balloon. So back in the final boss model behavior, I can take that value. So float charge equals here the charge. Now let's say this is the multiplier for speed. Currently it's 50 because it's pretty fast, but it's also going to get charge by 10. So for every additional 10 charge, this value will be increased by 1. So about at 500 charge, the cutter would move about twice as fast. Also, it's going to drain some lives as well each time it loops. So deduct 20 lives plus by, let's say, negative 100. That way, for every 100 charge, it's going to drain an additional life, other than the default negative 20. Okay, this time the cutter is going to start draining lives. So this time it's a lot faster. I lost 25 lives. That should be correct. Okay, it looks like it's 24. So I'm gonna just restart all this and spawn another boss. See, the cutter should be way worse this time, because I didn't just let it charge up for a long time. Okay, I'll try and destroy it now. Okay, yeah, it's just really fast. It's draining a lot more than 24 lives like before. So yeah, basically you're not supposed to let the cutter charge get too far, otherwise you're gonna have to deal with this, which will probably defeat the player. I never explained all the mechanics. I can go on to effects. So I've explained before that you, in part 2, spawn effect, you can add effects to the fight. And in this case, this is energy shield. This is simply a copy of the Super Monkey middle path ability. But because mono behavior is 1 every frame, I don't want the effect to be spam. That's going to cause a lot of lag. So instead I'm going to make it do the effect every 20 frames. It doesn't need to scale with the speed of the game because effects is cosmetic. So to do that, I added the property public float charge effect CD. And then only when that is at 0, it's going to do that effect because of this if statement. Only if it's less than or equal to 0. But then that sets the value to 20. And if it's above 0, it's not going to do the effect. Instead, it's going to keep reducing that value. An additional condition is when the boss is defeated, it's going to just run all these codes. This deletes all the stuff going on here to, I guess, so because it's no longer needed. Anyways, this is going to delete all the effects, all the diamond effects, since we don't need those anymore. Okay, that's a bit too intense. I'll also make the effect a bit slower at around 40. And also, the effect should only be active during the charging process. So I'm going to just move this into while cutter charge is above 0. I'm going to start adjusting some of these health values. 10,000. Bump this up to 40,000. I'm going to make the boss have more reasonable health for around 100 boss. And then I'm going to do a proper test soon. I'm doing a test one with much higher health. Also increase the health of the diamonds and all of the sub-bosses. I'm doing a test one with much higher health. So this time I only have the Glaive Dominus, but its domination effect can still break through the armor. A few other things. Now, just for context, in Elite mode, Blunarius has 8 million health on round 100. This only has 5 million, so it shouldn't be too much of an issue, I don't think. I know when I made Boss Rush Recharge, I balanced it expecting the average player to be better, but then I had to nerf it a few times. So that's why I had to make sure it's less than Elite this time. Add a mobile eliminator. Okay, it should be using its ultimate below 3 million, as that's 60%. Diamond effect should start. Okay, diamond effect started. I'll take this out. Go to primary. Okay. Okay. Okay, good. Okay, they could have charged you out kind of high, but the super mines took care of it, so that's good. We'll still one of these down for good measure. Okay, the primary is over there. I mean, global towers are good. They can always attack the correct gem. Because I'm using the vulnerability property, all the towers will only be able to target the one that is vulnerable. So they always know what the correct one is. 1,000 charge, that's kind of dangerous. Oh, these two. Okay, support should go down pretty quick fast. Okay, looped once. Okay. There's only one cutter left. So, better be ready for that. I think this town, I heard that Sinchi Paragon was buffed, at least according to ESAB. I haven't checked the patch notes. Here we go again. Okay, those should take care of it. Military support. Okay, the cutter's launched. Okay, cutter got stopped. That's good. Okay, the boss should go down quite shortly. Well, I guess that's all. Thanks for watching my series. If you somehow understood anything I explained, I'll go into further detail if someone in the comments asks for it, but that's all for now. Thanks.